My name is Gayle Bull. I live in Mineral Point, Wisconsin. I came to haiku through my husband, Jim Bull, who started American Haiku magazine with Don Eulert at the University of Wisconsin-Platteville in 1963. American Haiku started actually back when Jim was medevaced out of Korea. He felt very guilty being one on a cot when guys who were injured were sitting in seats, but he was really sick with hepatitis A and was in the hospital in Yokohama for 8 weeks. After the first couple of weeks, he felt pretty good and was bored because all his books and everything were left behind. And a Japanese ward boy who spoke English started bringing him books of tanka, haiku, and other books about Japanese culture. He became interested first of all in tanka and then very interested in haiku. When he got out of the Army, he kept reading haiku, but he went back to college. He got bored with college for a while, taught dance for Arthur Murray, then went back to grad school, and then started teaching at the University at Platteville, Wisconsin. He met Don Eulert, and Don had been actively involved in the little magazine business and in the poetry business, knew a lot of the people, so they decided to start a magazine called American Haiku. Nobody at the university was too impressed with it, the idea. They thought it was kind of silly. They were more interested in athletics and in agriculture. So Jim and Don, both being kind of rebels, decided that they were going to succeed in spite of the university. Don remembered yesterday, Don Eulert, that it started with, on pink paper, because that was the only paper they could get, announcements of a haiku contest, which went to all the creative writing teachers at universities in the country. And then Jim, who never thought small about anything, said, we're going to take out an ad in the Saturday Review of Literature. So they did. And John Ciardi, the poetry editor of the Saturday Review, picked it up and put a little note in his column that a new little magazine was going to be starting in the United States called American Haiku in all the godforsaken places in the world, Platteville, Wisconsin. Ciardi came to visit a couple of years later. He was a guest speaker at the university, and he came to our house for a reception and told us that he never thought it would fly, but was very happy that it did. Jim and Don ran American Haiku for the first year, and then there was some sort of a disagreement between Jim and Don, mostly I think because Jim was kind of a control freak, and Jim had gotten very close with Clem Hoyt. Jim believed with anything, you need to start with a basic form, learn the basic form, and then develop. And then you could go into variations of the 5-7-5. And Don was more interested in proceeding directly into the variations. Then there were some other personal things which I'm not going to go into. And so Clement Hoyt bought the magazine, and he ran it for 1 year. Clem was a very dear friend of ours. He would come to Madison twice a year. He had serious skin cancer. And he came to Madison, Wisconsin, to one of the greatest skin cancer experts in the world at the time, Dr. Mose, for what we jokingly called his burnouts, which meant they were burning out the cancers on his face. And then after all that, when he was suffering pain, he came to visit us and our 4 children, who dearly loved Clem. I'm going to throw a personal thing in here. The first time Clem came to visit us, the 2 older children went into the room with him, and when they opened his suitcase, there was a gun. Our children had never been exposed to guns, didn't know anybody who carried a gun, and their eyeballs went out on stems. But Clem had run 4 weekly newspapers in Houston, had been threatened several times. Also had a hobby of going out and looking for lost silver mines in Texas. So he carried a gun. We got American Haiku back after a year. several guest editors. I did all of the pre-screening of the haiku that came in. Went to the post office every day, got it. And remember, people were just learning haiku at that time and doing a lot of experimenting. I remember Nick Virgilio, who turned into a fantastic poet. But Nick would send reams of paper, haiku, every week. And sometimes the same line would appear, and he was experimenting with changing the lines around to create haiku. Some of which were really, really good, and some of which were, of course, really, really bad. Every haiku poet knows you have really, really good ones and really, really bad ones. I did the accounting, took care of getting the mailing out, and did the first run through. And then I wasn't one of the editors, but I read everything. And then I started working with children in the grammar schools with haiku. We talked a little bit about the structure of haiku, but I was more interested in getting the kids interested in the seasonality in haiku. And so we did a lot of talk about season in haiku, and then the kids would write haiku and send them to me. Then out of that came the study on season in haiku, which appeared in the last 2 issues of American Haiku. We got very small response from people, but we were able to do a statistical analysis. And I don't remember how it turned out. I'd have to go back and reread the articles. But that's something that I still think is very, very important in haiku, and I feel not only nature's seasons, but the seasons of man are important. I've been involved in haiku since 1963. Took a several-year hiatus from about 1968 to 69, where I worked with other things. I went back to college, got a degree in accounting and finance, and then worked as a bank auditor and a university compliance auditor for 25 years. After my husband and I retired from the university, we came to Mineral Point. I opened a bookstore. My husband died after a year of being here. And Jerome Cushman, who was a good friend of ours, and we'd been in contact for many years, published a book and asked me if I would do a book signing. He had several relatives in the area who would come to the book signing. And so we offered a small workshop at Shake Rag Alley, and Charlie Trumbull and Jeff Winke both came out. And Jeff went back early, but Charlie and Jerome Cushman and I sat here over a bottle of wine and came up with the idea of a Cradle of American Haiku festival. And in 6 months we put it together. I had been off and on writing haiku, but not sending any out for publication. I'd been reading it, but not involved in the haiku field. We did the first Cradle of American Haiku, and since then I've been very involved. We have haiku workshops here once a month, and this is now the 4th summer that I have done. This year another Cradle of American Haiku. This was the 3rd one. And last year we did a haiku retreat, which was very informal. We had no formal programs. The programs, the workshops, evolved out of conversations. I'm not sure where I stand on the current state of haiku because I don't understand Gendai. I'm going to Melissa Allen's session on Gendai this morning to get more understanding about it. I've read Haiku 21, Lee Gerga and Scott Metz did that. I'll be reading it and everything, I'll be understanding, and suddenly I'll run into, I just don't get. And I'll read it 2 or 3 times, and sometimes I just have to close the book up and put it away because, excuse me, I just don't understand it. And I want to understand it. And one day Melissa Allen said to me, "Do you have to understand it?" And I thought, well, I suppose I don't, but if I don't understand it, why am I going to read it? And particularly, why am I going to reread it? But I don't want haiku to stalemate. I think haiku needs to grow. Any art form needs to grow, and it needs to evolve. But I also think in that growing and in that evolving, it still has to maintain its roots. In order, not by that I don't mean that it needs to stay 5-7-5. But I think the basic nature of haiku should not change too much, or then it becomes just a short poem. I do think haiku has a social value as well as a literary value. The social value is the workshops, getting together, helping each other with our haiku. I've had guests come to our workshops and they are surprised at how friendly everybody is and how willing to accept suggestions that people in haiku are that other poets are not willing to accept. I think more and more people are coming to haiku and seeing haiku as a valid literary form. One of the things I'm doing, and I'm excited about, is the concept of the Little Lending Library started in Madison, Wisconsin, and is really flourishing. Well, in Mineral Point, it's flourishing in a slightly different way. We have a couple of little lending libraries, but I have one out on my front porch, and I have directions in it. I have 3x5 cards, and one drawer with 3x5 cards, one drawer where people can put their finished haiku. A lot of them I get are not haiku. Some of them are pretty good. But I'm having a lot of fun with it. I put together little booklets of the poetry that people leave. And in this way, I think I am promoting haiku. And I put some haiku books out there once in a while, copies of good haiku out there for people to read. So I'm hoping that people will pick these up and start moving into the field of haiku.